What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Jared Barnes Show. I'm your host, Jared Barnes. Tyler and Nate are here with me today. Micah is not. We miss you, Micah. Hope you're back next week. Today's episode, we're going to bounce around the NFL quite a bit. We got to talk about Taylor Heinicke, the Minnesota Vikings, Aaron Rodgers, Cowboys, Steelers, stuff like that. We got some quick hits. NBA talk with Nate, F1 with Tyler. And then to end the episode, we will debate who the greatest non quarterback, the greatest player that isn't a quarterback in NFL history is. It's gonna be a fun episode. Hope you enjoy it. We won't waste any more of your time though. We will just get right to it with the NFL. And last night, not last, Monday night game with Taylor Heinicke and the Commanders upsetting the Eagles was the perfect way to end this NFL weekend. It was a crazy weekend from the start. You got Jeff Saturday, an interim head coach for the Colts, getting hired and then getting his first win. You had the Vikings Buffalo Bills game where everybody, I think, thought the Bills were just going to come in and win that game, and they didn't. Then you had the Cowboys Dallas game, and then to end the whole weekend, we had this game, which was fantastic. The Commanders dominated from the jump, though. Their time of possession was extremely high. They had 40 plus minutes of time of possession, and they had a ridiculous amount of plays ran, specifically in the first half compared to the second half. So in the first half, the Commanders had 51 plays to the Eagles 19, and their time of possession was 23:49 to the Eagles 6 of 11. And on today's episode of the Pat McAfee Show, Taylor Heinicke was on there. He was talking about how they believe that converting third downs was key for them. They needed to do so to win the game. And in the first half alone, they were 9 of 12 on third downs and 1 of 1 on fourth down. Extremely impressive stuff. But they've been a very good team. And with Taylor Heinicke in his last 12 starts for the Commanders, he's been 8-4. And on this season alone, they're 3-1 with Heinicke. Now they're only going to get better as the season goes on because this week they're expected to get their best pass rusher in Chase Young back playing this week. He hasn't played since last November when he tore his ACL and MCL, and having a player of his caliber back is only going to do them, specifically their defense, so much better because they're already playing really well on the defensive side of the football, and to get a guy like that would be absolutely fantastic. But what makes Taylor Heinicke so good? Because for whatever reason, when Carson Wentz, a guy who's supposed to be more talented than Taylor Heinicke, is in the game for the Washington Commanders, and he hasn't been healthy, but when he's in the game, for whatever reason, Washington just wasn't good. They're 5-5 now on the season, but before Heinicke took over as a starter, they were 2-4. They weren't very good. Heinicke had to come in, I think, in one of those games to bail out Wentz, and since then, Heinicke and the Washington Commanders have beaten Green Bay. They've beaten the Eagles. They've beaten the Colts, and they played a very close game versus the Minnesota Vikings, who we just saw this week beat the Buffalo Bills, a very good football team. The Vikings are one of the top teams, if not the top team in the NFC, and Washington went toe to toe with them, and then a few weeks later went toe to toe with Eagles, who many would consider a legit Super Bowl contender at this point. In my opinion, what makes Taylor Heinicke so good is he plays every game like if he doesn't win the game, Dan Snyder's going to take him out back and put a bullet in his head. He plays out of his mind because he's nervous that he's not going to play the next game if he doesn't. And that's why I have a lot of respect for Taylor Heinicke. Because Taylor Heinicke, every single play is his last play in every single game. And it makes for an entertaining brand of football. Because he's not afraid to throw it deep to Terry McLaurin, even if he's in double coverage. Because he knows Terry's going to go up and get that thing. And he knows if he throws an interception, he at least tried. He doesn't care. Because a lot of his intangibles, his arm strength, his accuracy, none of them are all that great. Especially compared to a guy like Carson Wentz, who has an immense amount of talent. But for whatever reason, the Commanders with Heinicke are just a much better football team, and they have been for 2.5 years at this point, and it's just impressive. But how the Eagles recover from this loss? They played sloppy football, and they had 3 turnovers in this game, which matched their season total. They now have 6. Going into this game, they only had 3 turnovers on their entire season, and in this game, they had 3. They just lost their tight end, Dallas Goedert, who's likely going to miss some time. And the Eagles' defense, since losing Jordan Davis, has on average allowed 6 yards to carry. Can they fix this problem? I don't know if they can. They're going to need Jordan Davis back, and I don't know what his timeline to return is. But until this problem is fixed, the Eagles' defense could be in for a world of hurt, specifically when they play teams in their division that run the football really well, like the Giants, the Commanders, and the Cowboys. Especially when the Cowboys get Zeke back. Nate, you're an NFC East aficionado. You're a Cowboys fan. Are you concerned about the Eagles moving forward with the way that they played on Monday night and just kind of their defense as a whole? I mean, the little stat about them giving up 6 yards to carry is terrible. Two plays and that gives up a first down. You think the Eagles are kind of should be nervous right now, or you think they're fine? That they can just recover from this loss and move on and be good.
I mean, I think a lot of people are looking at the rest of the Eagles schedule and we're saying, there's a lot of winnable games. The road to being undefeated is super easy. But with the emergence of the Commanders, the emergence of the Dallas Cowboys, the emergence of the Giants, man, forgot about them. Like, these teams are really good, and these are going to be games that you have to fight for. And especially since, the Commanders have a good running attack, the Dallas Cowboys have a good running attack, New York has a good running attack. Like, all of these teams have a good running attack. I think it's going to be harder to win a division. The Cowboys lost kind of first their chances um, within taking that first spot, but the Giants are right there. If they lose, like if the Eagles lose 2 more games, that first spot's up for grabs. And I think there should be some worry, but not anything that you panic over. You're not ripping jerseys, you're not burning jerseys
Yeah.
over this loss, by no means. But I mean, I don't think that they're as undefeatable. I don't think like they're as strong as people projected them to be after their hot start. I personally didn't think they were that good as people were describing them to be since the start of the season. I think a lot of people were already marking them as Super Bowl champions, even Super Bowl like contenders, especially with I mean, they might lose to the Bills, who are a really good football team, the Chiefs, who are a very good football team. But for me, I didn't really believe that they were that good. So it should be a little concern, but nothing to write home about.
Just
Yeah.
on like a little side note, I wanted to add like I agree with you on your assessment where they will like um have been all that as people have been really hyping them up to. Um in my opinion, I think they underestimated the Washington Commanders. And I don't think they were coming into it expecting the struggle that they ended up having. Because I don't think anyone was thinking that the Commanders were going to take up a win on the Eagles. Like I don't think that's something that really anyone was saying. Um, but it kind of just goes to show that the Eagles kind of have to rethink how they're playing and how they're looking at the other teams in the other divisions right now and just being very wary because they can't let things like what happened this past weekend happen again. They can't start underestimating teams or getting sloppy this late in the season, especially with like playoffs coming up and even leading up to the Super Bowl. If you're gonna continue to stay at that contentious level where you were and kind of still are at this point in the season, you gotta keep pushing forward.
Yeah, and a lot of coaches, one of their biggest issues sometimes with starting so hot and starting like undefeated is it's like a lot of people talk about it sometimes where it's like it's kind of hard to coach sometimes. Like it's easy to get guys to buy in when you're winning, but like when you're like 9-0 heading into like 8-0, 9-0 heading into week 10, like it why would those guys think they've been playing and doing anything wrong because they're winning every single game? This happened a few years ago at the 11-0 Steelers. We were a bad football team. We started 11-0. We were not good though. We could barely beat a Dallas Cowboys team whose quarterback at that time was Garrett Gilbert. People forget he even was the quarterback of Dallas that year because it was Garrett Gilbert, Ben Naducci, and there was a third guy that I can't even remember his name either. Yeah, Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton. Can't believe I forgot the Red Rifle. Can't believe I forgot the Red Rifle, but we struggled against a Garrett Gilbert led Cowboys team who wasn't even that good that year. And there were some other teams we struggled mightily against that were also very bad. Washington that year is the team that ended our undefeated streak in 2020. We were 11-0. Washington beat us. We didn't win a single game after that. Eagles are not going to do the same thing because I think the Eagles are actually a good football team. But I think Sirianni is probably excited to come in after a loss a little bit more than he has been over the wins because you can grow complacent. And I think the Eagles team just grew complacent because they got a lot of vets in that team. But like you're in the right now, you're like right in the middle of it, the thick of it, where you're too far from the beginning to see any of that, but you're too far from the end really to really focus on the end. You're just kind of right in the middle. And this is the point where teams can lose their motivation and kind of lose their focus. This is also the same time that you'll see a team come out of nowhere and start winning games because they just found their focus. S- Commanders, maybe even Green Bay, because this could have been the week they turned it around. Buffalo maybe is losing their focus. They've dropped a couple games late. Josh Allen has 10 interceptions. He's had 6 in the last 3 weeks. He only has 3 touchdowns. It's been bad. But that's maybe because they ran into a buzzsaw with 1 PM Kirk Cousins, because 1 PM Kirk Cousins is a dog. That Bills and Vikings game,
Certified.
yes. He's actually a certified dog according to Nate, so we're good. Certified dog. But that 1 PM Vikings Bills games was absolutely spectacular. There was a couple points in it where I think Kirk Cousins knew that more people were watching than a normal 1 PM game because you started to see a little bit of primetime Kirk come out on that one interception in the I think it was late in the first half that was very bad. And if he had one very bad interception, it was like, Kirk, you're gonna get a lot of flack for that, but listen, pretend it's a 1 PM game like it is and not a primetime game and he'll be fine. And he was after that. He was literally fine after he realized that it was just a 1 PM game. But the Vikings at one point in the fourth quarter were down 17 points. They came back, sent that game into overtime. They had one of the greatest, what some people are deeming one of the greatest catches. Not me, but some people are deeming that one of the greatest catches to ever take place on a football field. I think the Odell Beckham catch is still that catch, but it literally defined an entire generation if you really think about it. That Odell catch, an entire generation just immediately started wanting to one hand the football because of Odell. I don't think that'll happen with this Justin Jefferson one, but he's a fantastic wide receiver, and that is because of his 9 he had 9 catches or 7 catches that were contested. Yeah, yeah, that's the one I wanted. I said the wrong number. He had 7 contested catches in the game on Sunday versus the Bills, and according to PFF, that is a single game record when they started tracking the stat in 2016. 7 contested catches is a ridiculous number of catches because that means you are going up with your body touching or against or in the vicinity of a defender. To have the kind of game he had where he had 193 yards on however many catches was fantastic. But he had a chance to end that game and he didn't. He failed to get a touchdown. Then a play later, Dalvin Cook doesn't get a touchdown. Kirk Cousins can't sneak it in. And then one of the craziest things I've ever seen at the professional football level happen next. Josh Allen gets under center and he fumbles the snap. I've never seen that at the professional level. I mean, I've seen it at times, but never like a center quarterback fumbled exchange. It could just have been due to the fact that Mitch Morse, he he knew he was going to get pushed back, so he stepped back early, right as he was snapping the football. It kind of screwed up the center quarterback exchange, but it caused the Vikings to score a touchdown, and they ended up being able to take a 3-point lead because of it. And then Buffalo had to do their thing, but it was just an insane game, and I'm glad Minnesota won because seeing that kind of resilience in the fourth quarter was great. And this is a thing that has been mentioned by some of their players in the past that have been on the team, like Patrick Peterson, about how they've been failed to close out games. He said on a podcast in the offseason that the Vikings' biggest issue last year was situational football. And he said it cost them 3 games minimum. And it comes down to the coaching. This is a team that this year has a different coach, has a whole different system, a different philosophy in there. And it shows because this team has been one of the top teams in the NFC. They're the only team since 2003 to win a game after trailing in the final minute of regulation when the opponent had possession of the ball. Part of that was because of how hard it was to stop Justin Jefferson out of the game, but I think part of it's just because this is a well-coached team. Now, the Vikings go home over the next few weeks, and they have a 3-game homestand versus the Cowboys, Patriots, and the Jets. They're already 4-0 at home, and I think they can end up going 7-0 at home after this 3-game homestand. I don't know how they'll fare against the Cowboys, but if it's a close game, my pick is the Vikings because they've proven that they can close out games. And they lost to the Eagles earlier in the year, but the Eagles just lost. They now have the same record. In your guys' mind, who is the top team in the NFC right now? Who is the top team in the NFC right now? Are we good? Is there a mic issue? Oh, it's on your end? Okay, we're good. But in your guys' mind, is the Vikings or the Eagles the top team in the NFC right now?
I would say when healthy, the Eagles probably have the better defense, um, instead of the Vikings. But I think, within late game situations, the Eagles haven't really been in a whole lot of late game situations. We haven't really seen them go through some struggles. And so it's hard to say, but with the sample size that we have right now and seeing that the Vikings can win games late against good teams, I'm gonna pick the Vikings right now. It's not anything against the Eagles. We have not seen them perform well late in the game. Am I echoing? Um, yeah, but that's just my take is that I really think that I don't really know. They're probably on the same plane, but I really do think that, we have to see more from the Eagles, more late game situations in order to make a full take on that.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna have to agree with you there, just because for the Eagles, this past game was the only time, like at all this season, that they've been down in points in the second half. It
It is actually the only time they've trailed in the
Yeah,
first.
mhm,
Literally the only time this season they've trailed in the second.
like, and they basically couldn't do anything about it, and they didn't do anything about it. So I'm with you on that because in the like when it comes down to much like later on in the season and especially in playoffs, clutching in the second half is going to be a key part of just the game. Like you're going to have to be good in the second half to really perform to get Super Bowl level. So yeah, I'm completely with you on the Vikings pick there.
Well, if you go a little further with that take as well, I mean, Josh Allen, what he's defeated, right? In overtime, he hasn't won a game in overtime. Is am I right on that stat?
I believe he's 0-4 in his last 4 overtime outings. I don't know about before that, but especially in recent history, he's just been Josh Allen specifically has not been good when it comes to late game situations. I mean, you think back earlier in the year with the Miami Dolphins game. I mean, that Miami Dolphins game where he threw maybe the worst thrown ball he's thrown since his rookie year, where that thing was a bouncer. And I don't fully understand what happened there. I don't know if maybe he's been suffering through maybe a bit of an injury all year, like he was in that previous game versus the Vikings. But that Vikings team is, in my mind, just extremely scary because they've proven they can play in the second half. The Eagles, like they have never been down in the second half until this game. Like I understand it was week 2 when they played and the Eagles won against the Vikings. It is a compared to then, it's a completely different Vikings team. I mean, I don't know if you go back and replay that game now, I don't know if the Vikings the Vikings in that game didn't get Justin Jefferson going. I don't think there's that kind of a problem now at all. In a There's a chance that they land Odell Beckham. There's a small chance. If the Vikings land Odell Beckham and he plays alongside Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and KJ Osborne, you can't stop them. Their defense won't need to stop anybody. They won't have to worry about anything. They'll destroy everybody. And it's going to be crazy to see it. Supposedly, though, Odell Beckham's rumored to be choosing between only two teams, the Cowboys or the Giants. Kind of what we discussed last week. If you listened to the episode last week, so that was kind of cool to hear that we were kind of thinking the right thing. We've done that all season. If you listen, literally all season.
Unironically, we have been on pretty early on conversations that have become completely accurate, like a week or like 2 weeks later. And I just think that's very cool for like as like small and consistent as we are. I don't know.
It's not shocking to me at all. I mean,
Yeah, no, with Jared, who is a
I
dictionary of
but like, I don't want to like toot our own horn, but I do feel like we've been around on like some things a lot like that, and I think we've all three here grown and like a lot in our knowledge, and like I think it's just shown, especially with our conversations where we can just kind of we've been able to almost pick out what's real and what's fake in certain things, and you know it's been very nice. It's been very nice. Hopefully, when this starts to grow a little bit more, thank you to all of you that listen. Though we do love you guys. Share it with somebody else that might listen too, though. Help this thing grow. But it's been kind of nice to feel like we've been on the right end of thinking on something. But with that being said, a team that was not on the right end this weekend, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Packers played. And the Dallas Cowboys did not win. They were on the wrong end of a game. Aaron Rodgers has been saying, "We're not dead." He said it after the game. And that's been the rallying cry of the Packers. And they certainly didn't look dead in that fourth quarter versus Dallas. For the first time this year, the Packers did what they should have been doing all year with the running backs they have in the backfield. They handed the ball off 37 times. They exposed Dallas's run defense when they ran for over 200 yards. But that's because they also have a good offensive line and two really good running backs. They should have been doing this all year. It just so happens that the game they do it in was versus their former head coach. Not a lot of holdover from the time that McCarthy was there to now, but it's still McCarthy's former team because he did coach there, and Rodgers is still there, so that's enough holdover in itself. Rushing for over 200 yards versus them was probably bittersweet for Aaron Rodgers. Also considering that he got to beat his former head coach. Also considering that I believe his record is 6-1 in his last 7 games against the Dallas Cowboys. I also think he threw 3 touchdowns, no picks. He played very well. 3 of those touchdowns were to rookie wide receiver Christian Watson, who came alive in this game after a struggling start to his career early. And even in that game, he had a struggling start because he had a drop early, and Rodgers visibly went over to him on the sideline. Then they had a conversation. I probably believe Rodgers probably told him to forget about it. I'm coming back to you. And he came back to him, and he had 3 touchdowns because of it. Now, the one bright spot for the Cowboys in this game is that Trayvon Diggs really didn't get targeted. Rodgers avoided throwing his direction pretty much the entire game, which, that's all right, but you still lose. Not good because they lost. They were up by 14 in the fourth quarter. Nate, what happened? How did you guys lose that game? What happened?
There actually should be more explanation on the backstory before that game. I think so. You think is it Saturday morning? Aaron goes to his kitchen table. There's a bunch of lines over there. He's like, you know what? Not today. I'm. I probably should not be doing that before a game. Not today. Joe Rogan's like, hey, you want to come over to my house for dinner? Smoke some stoogies. Drink some beer. And no, not today. I need to focus on my playing style and stuff. Matt LaFleur is like, you know what? Instead of like making all these like fancy plays that don't do anything, maybe I should just, hand it off to our great running backs. Maybe you should play some football with the guys that we have. Maybe I shouldn't be a bad coach for a week. And then, Christian Watson's like, instead of wasting my gloves with butter, maybe I should probably, get some water on there, wipe them off, make them sticky so I can catch some balls this week. Um, a lot. No, I mean, going from that, everything went right for the Packers. You know, they were not handing the ball off before this week, not very often. They did a little bit last week, but not very often, not as much as they did this game. Aaron Rodgers only threw 20 passes, and outside of the third down play call that LaFleur called at the end of regulation, he called a pretty good game overall. And Dak Prescott threw two interceptions. One was stupid. One was, I think it was a deflection. One was stupid in the end zone. That was at least a field goal that we should have had.
I was gonna say the one that he did throw was an awful play.
I,
It was
I don't.
very bad.
Well, it was because I think somebody went up when he should have went parallel, and so it was a miscommunication. But it's still a bad interception for sure. And I think I'm not sure this is exactly a issue with the Cowboys. It's more of a everything went right for the Green Bay Packers. They're playing against their former coach. Aaron Rodgers is feeling it. He threw 3 touchdowns. Their run offense did really well. Um, I mean, besides the Cowboys' run defense, did get exposed. We were not a great run defense to begin with coming into this game at all. And,
The Bears a few weeks ago ran through you guys.
oh,
And
absolutely.
I feel like every week since, your run defense has kind of been put on blast.
Yeah, I think that's kind of more of and that's probably why they weren't throwing Trayvon's way because they're like, we can just run over this defense, and that we probably should have added another piece at the trade deadline. Sucks that we didn't, but yeah, I think besides our run defense, that's something we need to patch up. I think everything else kind of went right for the Packers, and it was a good game. Me and my friend were Packers, and we said, me and my friend is a Packers fan. We made a pact, like we're not going to talk about this game. Emotions are high, like we're not going to talk about this game, and we still didn't talk about the game. I don't think we've talked about it yet, but I think there's a lot of emotions. Cowboys, Packers, um, McCarthy's return to Green Bay, um, you know, Aaron Rodgers. There's a lot surrounding this game and a lot of stigma surrounding this game. It's a one-time thing, and 14-3 doesn't sound too bad. So, I mean, there's definitely going to be a challenge next week against the Vikings, and I think we'll really see, how good um, the Vikings are or how good the Cowboys are next week, depending on how that goes. It's a 1 p.m. game too, so definitely Kirk Thuggins is coming out. But if Trayvon Diggs becomes that lockdown corner, and we can somewhat bottle up um, Dalvin Cook, I think we have a good shot to beat the Vikings. Um, so yeah, I'd say watch out for next week. Next week would be a real testament to see how good of a team we are. This game had a lot of emotion, and so this is more of an outlier to me rather than a full time thing.
Do you think that the Cowboys can afford to drop 2 games? Because I don't think they're gonna be able to beat the Vikings, me personally. Personally, I just don't see how it's gonna happen. Like, I think the Vikings are gonna destroy you guys.
Y-
I'm gonna say that open and honestly. I don't think you guys stand a chance versus Jefferson and Cook.
Yeah, honestly, I think, like you said, I think it's going to be a situation where Cowboys are going to have to prove if they can be good enough to even compete with the Vikings.
And
It,
I've said in the past that I think the Cowboys could be Super Bowl contenders, and, like, I'm ready to retract my statement because I thought you guys should have pounded the Packers. They did take away time of possession and force you guys to not have the ball as much, which is a great key to victory. The team should do much more, and they don't. But that's a whole different conversation for another day and another time. Maybe the offseason we'll discuss a little bit more football, maybe some football strategies that maybe teams should use. And I'll kind of give my entire coaching run through of what I would do in certain situations versus certain teams. But the Vikings, back to the Vikings Cowboys. Justin Jefferson's going to be hard to cover. KJ Osborne, already tough to cover. Cook's tough to stop in the run game. Like, in your division, with as good as it is, with the Commanders figuring things out seemingly now, Eagles still what 2 games ahead of you now, even though they lost, and the Giants just above you guys in the division. You guys are third in the AFC, in the NFC East, can you guys afford to drop 2 straight?
We can't afford to drop 2 straight, but I would not go as far to say that, you should retract your statement that the Dallas Cowboys could be Super Bowl contenders. I mean, the Eagles lost this week, and they didn't lose to Aaron Rodgers. They lost to Taylor Heinicke. Great guy. I love the guy, but he's no Aaron Rodgers, man. And so, I mean, come on, man.
He beat Aaron Rodgers a few weeks back. Don't forget on a play that was a ridiculous play. We talked about it earlier on his decision making and things like that, where he just don't care. But Heineke's that dude. I love Heineke.
Yeah, no, he's been great. But still, if we're talking about skill and the quarterback, he's not Aaron Rodgers. They don't have the Commanders don't have running backs like Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon. You know, the Packers are a better team than their record suggests them to be. They just haven't figured it out. And I think this is a turning point for the Packers season. It just sucks that, the Vikings are leading their division and they're probably going to run away with that division. The NFC East might all make the playoffs. Like that's actually something. Both teams, AFC East and NFC East, have almost every team in the playoffs. The Commanders are like half a game out. So, it's a tough division on our side. Um, but I think it's gonna be a real testament to see if the Cowboys beat the Vikings, we're legit. If they don't beat the Vikings, there's gonna be some questions. And I think maybe by then you could retract your statement. But I'll say it now, but I really do think that we have a chance against the Vikings. I think we're still one of the better teams in the NFL. Not a whole lot of teams with a Micah Parsons on their defense. Not a whole lot of teams with the Demarcus Lawrence off the edge on their defense. And so I think this defense can figure out the run, stopping the run. And yeah, we're just gonna have to wait and see until next week.
Yeah, it'll be intriguing to see. And you mentioned like how tough the NFC East is. Like last night during the Monday Night Football game, ESPN threw up their because ESPN just with their stats is wild. There's things they can come up with sometimes, regardless whether they're true or not. Interesting that's an interesting discussion in itself. Reporting that Najee Harris was homeless and the first time he slept in a bed was at the Alabama campus when that was completely a lie, and they fabricated that last year. And Najee called him out after the game, and they were like, "Oh, we're sorry, you said that to us, though." And he was like, "I never said that." But they came out with this was an actual fact stat about the win percentage of the NFC East, highest in NFL history for a division, highest in NFL history. I think hopefully I'm not spitting misinformation by saying that out loud. That seems like I could have heard it wrong and just heard highest in the NFL and just immediately go highest in NFL history. But the win percentage for the NFC East is crazy. The NFC as a whole, not all that great, but we'll see how it goes because the Cowboys were not great. But since we're talking about the NFC East, let's bounce over to the other division you mentioned, the AFC East, and talk about a team that now took first place in their division because of the Buffalo Bills. This is the other extremely good division in the NFL. The Dolphins pummeled the Browns. And at the trade deadline, they made a trade for running back Jeff Wilson Jr. from the San Francisco 49ers. They had no use for him at this point because they traded for Christian McCaffrey. Jeff Wilson, a very talented running back, and he's proven that since he showed up to Miami. He has 215 yards on the ground and through the air combined. He has 3 touchdowns in his 2 games playing, and he averages 85 rushing yards a game and 6.5 yards a carry. Their next best running back on the team is Raheem Mostert, who averages about 50 yards rushing a game. So they've struggled to run the ball, and I like Mostert. He's a really good running back, but Wilson's showing up and pretty much just stealing the job from them is interesting because they're former teammates in San Francisco. They're cool with each other, but at the same time, like Jeff Wilson Jr. has been a real difference maker in that Miami offense. And it's going to only help them moving forward because they still have a Bugatti and a Lamborghini lining up outside. They have 2 of the fastest wide receivers in the NFL in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Like, see, those 2 lining up on the outside when you actually have to also play the run is scary. Now, their quarterback on that team, Tua Tagovailoa, is climbing up the MVP race. I don't necessarily agree with it. But right now, he has better MVP odds than Jalen Hurts. He has better MVP odds than Lamar Jackson. And he's got better MVP odds than Kirk Cousins at every single sports book in the country. Patrick Mahomes is favorited. Josh Allen and Tua Tagovailoa are plus 500 to win the MVP award at this point. Really good odds. Odds I'm staying away from, specifically on Josh Allen, because Josh Allen's played really badly, and he leads the NFL with most interceptions on the year with 10. He hasn't played great, especially the last couple weeks, but Tua's played fantastic. Do I think Tua is deserving to be in that MVP race? Not really, but when you look around the rest of the NFL, who else is? I feel like offensively this year it's been kind of lackluster. I mean, there's not many guys that I would like throw on that list. I'd throw like Justin Jefferson on that list, but he's like down there. He's got like plus 1,000, like something like ridiculous odds to get it, and they'll never give the MVP to a wide receiver. Why would they do that? Cooper Cup had one of the greatest wide receiver seasons of all time last year, and I don't think he got that many votes at all for MVP.
I think as the Vikings record starts to climb, I think you probably should put Kirk Cousins into that conversation. I don't really know his stats, but just being a team that's good with, you know, he's probably putting up some numbers. I just, you don't we're just starting to hear about the Vikings because they play in Minnesota. They're usually the Packers' son. And so nobody until this season, nobody really talked about the Vikings. And so more of like, oh, the Purple People Eaters of back in the day, that was a great Vikings team. That was the only time the Vikings were ever mentioned during the regular season of the NFL. And they were never mentioned in the postseason because they were never there. But I think as they climb up, Kirk Cousins should be in that conversation. But I don't think that Josh Allen or Tua are deserving to be in that spot no more. I think, with recent games, they beat up on the Browns, that's cool. It's still the Browns. No matter what decade you're playing them, they're still the Browns. And Josh Allen has not looked like a great player. I think if you're talking about MVP candidates, excuse me. Excuse me.
Jackson could be involved in that conversation with Patrick. I knew where you were going. But
Under the table. That's probably the only place that he's gonna be um, near an MVP podium. But yeah, I think it should be Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, and then probably Kirk Cousins is a dark horse. I think those are probably my three picks that could be MVPs this season and are deserving to be MVPs this season.
yeah, and I think the MVP, there's the only one that I think is really deserving of it at this point is Patrick Mahomes. And they'll never throw Geno Smith in that conversation because of his stats. They're not fantastic. But Geno Smith being the player that he is this year, it's like he's like the most improved player in NFL history.
They wrote him off, but he didn't run back.
The
That's
greatest quote of all time. Still
absolutely.
to this day. He said it week one. That thing gets. I think I've heard that thing every single week since. Every time he wins a game too. I mean, this week, ugly, ugly loss. You can't lose to Tampa Bay. I understand it's in Germany. I understand you're like timeline wise 10 hours off, and you were pretty much playing that game at like I don't know midnight or 11 o'clock your own time, which is for your body. That's when they kicked off. Probably awful. Like that's an awful time to play a game for your body. I don't know if they're going in a bye week this week, but I hope for their sake they are because they need it after that Germany trip. Now the Germany crowd was fantastic over there, but Gino played averagely. Other guys that could have put their names on the list hasn't performed well at all, like Joe Burrow. I don't think Lamar Jackson's performed well enough to be higher than Tua. So like it's interesting. It's been disappointing, definitely disappointing, but I feel like offensively this year, like there's just not as many like extremely dominant quarterbacks that there has been in the past. And I don't know if it's because the defenses are catching up to him or the NFL is reverting more back to running the football more. But I haven't really noticed that as much either. So it's just been a very interesting year.
I think the methods of offense this season have been very rubber bandy in a way, where it's kind of just been like
oh, some teams are kind of doing this, some teams are doing this, some teams have nothing going on. Like, and there's been so much like change in different teams' rosters on who's playing what, who's doing what, who's getting a chance to play. Like, there's been so much of that happening this season that we haven't really seen a real, like, clear superstar or someone that's really just been popping off, like, every single week so far this season, and honestly, I think it's just way too early, especially for this season currently, to really say anything about, like, the MVP yet, just because I don't think the people that are currently making their way up and they're, like, rubbing like, are finally or have finally shaken the rust off, have like, are being given their chance.
It's just been like a very weird NFL season. I feel like a lot of teams are just like very average and or like very bad. And then there's like a few just outliers that are just extremely good teams. There's like 3 or 4 really good teams, really dominant teams. Everybody else feels very average, and then the rest just feel unwatchable. And speaking of unwatchable football, this week it was bearable. The Steelers were bearable to watch. They did beat the Saints, who are on that unwatchable list, even though they have Alvin Kamara and the best rookie wide receiver in Chris Olave. They're still a terrible football team. Why? I have no idea. Their defense is not good, and their quarterback, Andy Dalton, a guy who I love, also not very good. They also weren't very good when Jameis was in. He wasn't in for very long, but they weren't very good with Jameis. So that's just a bad football team. They gave up 217 rushing yards though to the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's the most rushing yards the Pittsburgh Steelers have had since December 11th, 2016 in Buffalo when they had 240 rushing yards. A quick reminder of what that game was. That was Le'Veon Bell's snow game for anybody that knows what that game is. One of the most dominant running back performances I've probably seen with my own two eyes. Le'Veon Bell was balling out in that game. And the rushing yards for the Steelers came from a lot of different places. George Pickens had 20. Najee Harris had 99. Jalen Warren had 37. And Kenny Pickett had 57. 57 rushing yards for a Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback is a lot because we've been used to watching Ben not be able to move out of the pocket for the last 4 years of his career. I love Ben Roethlisberger, and it seemingly seems like every day that I've complained about Matt Canada, Ben has been more connected to the organization, more connected to the organization. He breaks down film now on his podcast. He likes to talk about maybe what they should do with the offense every single week on his podcast called Footballin'. If you haven't listened, he drinks beer and talks about football. Not for me, because he like ranks the beer in a very weird way, where he like really talks about the taste, and it's just to me bizarre. Just if you want to drink a beer, just drink a beer. Do whatever you want to do. You don't got to break down the taste of it. But Ben, I love you. It's all right. Just say you're an alcoholic. But amo- let's not go there. Let's not go there. But listen, Ben's awesome. Ben has a great football mind. He was in the NFL for a long time. We've just recently seen a player that's never been a coach at any level except high school become an NFL head coach. I would like to see Big Ben next year be the Steelers' offensive coordinator. I think it would benefit the Steelers. He loves Pat Frymuth. He has a great relationship with those guys. He's recently removed from the locker room. It would be great for him to come in. I think Matt Canada is still just a bad offensive coordinator. Yeah, we won this game, but I'm going to continue to beat that drum until that drum is literally broken because he's just a bad offensive coordinator. Kenny Pickett played very averagely, but luckily our running game bailed us out in this game. And the fact that we had TJ Watt back to, do his thing because him being on the field makes such an impact for the team. But I don't want to waste any more time talking about a team that's definitely not a competitor and a really bad football team because there's not really a whole lot that I have to say. It was a boring game. It wasn't that fun to watch. but we won, and I'm happy a little bit. I mean, I'm wearing a Yin shirt today because I literally had to rep for the Steelers because I was excited that they actually won a game, and I was, for a little bit thinking that that wasn't going to happen for at least a few more weeks or ever again the rest of the season. But they won, and I'm okay with that. Moving on though to a team in their division, Deshaun Watson is back in the building officially this week, and he's able to practice. The Browns are on a bye week this week, so it's probably not a whole lot of practices, but probably trying their best to get him back in game shape, make sure his body is in store, give him a couple massages, get him ready for Week 13 versus the Houston Texans. And that's going to be a fun game because, Week 12 versus the Texans, because it's crazy that his first game back is literally against his old team in the city where he committed unspeakable crimes. Almost like it was intentional, like you said, scripted. It's ridiculous, but that place is going to be extremely toxic. I cannot wait to see on Twitter the despicable things being done in the crowd with the signs and whatever else they decide to do down in Houston because that's a pretty electric atmosphere. And when Houston, the city comes alive, that's probably a sold out game. That's probably a Sunday night game. And it shouldn't be because Texans are a terrible football team that allows 180 plus yards a game rushing. And they continued that trend this week versus the Giants when they allowed 191 yards rushing. A terrible defense. But because that's Deshaun Watson's return to football, that's probably a primetime game. I'm not sure if it is, but that's probably a primetime game.
We're already accustomed to watching the Denver Broncos put up 3 field goals in primetime games. I think we're already used to sucky teams already playing on primetime.
Yeah, but the NFL world does not need to see Davis Mills and his long neck march out there on that football field and play Bill Cosby, pretty much. Because that's pretty much who he's playing. Like, we don't need to see that matchup. No offense. All offense to Deshaun. I think you're a bad dude. You used to be my favorite football player in the world, and you did what you did. He was my favorite football player until the news broke, and I was like, gonna take a step back from this guy because that's way too many allegations for me to think that's not true. Still to this day, even though he's innocent, I can't do the air quote with this finger because I almost lost it today. But either way, move on from Deshaun because I think he's a scumbag. Bill Belichick, great NFL coach, is not happy right now. He wants challenges inside the final 2 minutes of games at the end of both halves. And that's completely fair because it was his bye week. And he was probably scouting out his opponents, probably watching that Bills game versus the Vikings, just to try to figure out what the Bills are going to look like down the stretch. And there's a Gabe Davis throw to the sidelines from Josh Allen, where Gabe Davis catches it and the ball bounces off the ground. He pretty much catches it. They rule it complete. They don't even review it. And then Walt Anderson comes on and says, "Yeah, that should have been reviewed. That's on us. We should have called that. Why didn't you? You're literally the NFL. You could have stopped the game if you wanted to. You could have reviewed it. You should have." And Bill Belichick the next day brought up an interesting conversation on, like, if they're supposed to be in charge of the reviews, they should make sure they get it right. I understand the NFL wants Josh Allen to win MVP, and they want the Bills to be good, but you can't force it too much and make it look obvious because they kind of revealed their whole hand on Sunday with that kind of a blatantly missed call. Blatantly, terribly missed call. And it was bad, but they had to make sure Josh Allen was able to redeem himself in the eyes of the media after his botched fumble exchange. But it brings up a great question because, like, why aren't reviews and why have we just always accepted that as gospel that there can't be reviews inside the last 2 minutes? I feel like no one's ever questioned that. Everybody's just been like, "Oh, that's the rule. We just leave it at that." And Bill Belichick's the first person to bring it up and, like, really question it. And I think it's a great conversation piece for, probably the off season because I don't think there's going to be any changes mid season for that. But over the off season, I think that conversation could get very, very loud because I think there's been a lot of missed calls in those final 2 minutes, and it's going to be interesting. The Lions won a game this week. Yes, the Lions. We're going to talk about the Lions because they had a comeback victory versus the Bears, and there's just an interesting stat that I want to throw out there. The Bears, a good team. Justin Fields, fun to watch. Well, the Bears not a good team, but Justin Fields, good quarterback. Yeah, my bad. I said that backwards. Justin Fields, fun quarterback to watch, but Bears not a great team. Lions, terrible team, terrible quarterback, terrible offense, terrible defense. Beats the Bears. It was the Lions' first win where they were down 14 points heading into the fourth quarter since October 31st of 1993. 30, no, not 30. Is it 30? 29 years, the Lions have not won a game where they've trailed 14 points in the fourth quarter. Barry Sanders was running the ball back then. That's how bad of an organization they are. They had Calvin Johnson and Matthew Stafford, and they couldn't come back because their defense and their team was just that bad for so many years. This is the first time they've won a game where they trailed 14 points in the fourth quarter in 29 years. Bears fans, I hate to say this, but you should probably be ashamed right now that you let the Lions win their first. Their yeah, poor Cameron. But Bears fans, you should be ashamed that you let the Lions win their first game where they trailed 14 points heading in the fourth quarter in 29 years. It's sad, but it's also a interesting state of where the Bears and the Lions franchises are right now. Because the Bears are trying to lose games. The Lions want to win games and are just really bad at football. But the last NFL thing I want to hit on is Jeff Saturday. And the reason I wanted to hit on this last is because he got very loud last week against Jeff Saturday. A lot of people in the media, and I respect a lot of the people in the media because it takes a lot of work. Because I know what kind of work it takes to do a podcast on my own with no producers or anything like that. Couldn't imagine what it would be like with a producer in my ear telling me I have to say a certain thing though. Just because they want a certain belief out there. And they want to conform the media a certain way and conform beliefs a certain way. I'm glad I don't have that. I don't ever want to have that. That's why I want this show to be independent for the rest of my life, if I can continue to do it for the rest of my life. Because Joe Thomas, a former offensive lineman in the NFL, came out with massive hate towards the hiring of Jeff Saturday. And I think that's because someone got in his ear and said things. He said that it was despicable that Jeff Saturday even accepted the job as an interim head coach and then felt the need to take a shot at Jim Irsay by saying Jim Irsay just wanted to hire one of his drinking buddies. Maybe saying that Jim Irsay was a drunk and made this decision in a terrible state of mind. No, Irsay made this decision because he still wanted to sell tickets even though he has a bad football team. That's what the part of the decision was. He also probably said, I don't know any of these guys that are hired on the defensive side of the football that have any sort of knowledge on like what the organization is like and how they like to do things there. John Fox is his first year in Indianapolis. He's a former head coach in the NFL though. Gus Bradley, former head coach in the NFL, first year in Indianapolis. Why would you let those guys be the interim head coach? They're already there. You want a different taste of somebody else to see what they can do. And Jeff Saturday, a former player who 15 years in the NFL, 14 of them in Indianapolis, guy knows football. It don't matter if he didn't need to be an assistant for 12, 15 years before becoming a head coach. It's an interim job. The Rooney Rule doesn't apply for a reason to interim jobs because people don't normally hire from the outside and because they're not a permanent head coach. And then on Sunday, a person I have massive respect for, and Bill Cowher came out with a very similar message. And Bill Cowher normally is a guy that doesn't really go by a script. It was very obvious Bill Cowher was going by a script on NFL Today on Sunday. Bill Cowher was hired at 34, coach the Pittsburgh Steelers. Bill Cowher wasn't ready in a lot of people's minds, in the media's mind, to be a head coach yet. Bill Cowher turned out to be a pretty good head coach, though, for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He is a Hall of Fame coach, and he only won one Super Bowl for Pittsburgh. But he's a Hall of Fame coach. He's fantastic. He was there for 20 years. And he came out against Jeff Saturday as well. And I just don't fully understand it. I think it's just a good thing for the players that they have a guy like Jeff Saturday getting hired. I think it'll actually open up for more diversity because if they're willing to hire someone that is a former player, who's to say they don't go out and hire someone else that's a former player as another head coach somewhere else? That opens up because a lot of the players in the NFL are of a minority. They're not a white dude. Now Jeff Saturday just happened to be connected to Ursay, and Jeff Saturday's beloved in the city of Indianapolis, but I just think the whole thing has gotten out of hand because Indianapolis, you look at the impact of hiring Jeff Saturday, a former offensive lineman. Indianapolis offensive line, terrible all season. Jonathan Taylor can get no time to run the football. Matt Ryan got literally hurt and benched because the offensive line was so bad. Matt Ryan gets flipped back in to be the starter like an hour before the game starts. Jonathan Taylor goes for 147, a season high this year, his best game of the season so far. One game under Jeff Saturday, a former offensive lineman. Matt Ryan also had his best game. I think it's a testament to Jeff Saturday getting those boys prepared, and because it's a whole freshness thing to the team. Like it's a different set of eyes on the team, seeing different things. I just thought a lot of the the media narrative on the Jeff Saturday thing got way out of hand, and I was kind of sick of hearing about it. Still sick of hearing about it. I'm still seeing a bunch of it on my timelines, but it's kind of calmed down now that he won a game. But it's gonna be interesting to see. That's all we had for the NFL today, though. So I'm gonna hand it over to Nate here because there is a lot of stuff going on in the NBA, and I'm interested to see what he has to tell us.
Yeah, like definitely this is the beginning part of the season for the NBA. So things are starting to heat up again. Seeing some teams that got off to hot starts, start to cool down a little bit. You're seeing some teams starting to get it figured out again. Um, but on Sunday night, Joel Embiid had an historic night. He scored 59 points, 11 rebounds, 8 assists, and 7 blocks. Insane stat line. And that was against the Utah Jazz. And Jo- the 76ers have been um, poised as a team that could potentially make a finals run. They've been posed as a team, these are legit contenders when James Harden is healthy. The Jazz still went toe for toe with the 76ers. Um, you know, Laurie Markkinen obviously did not win this battle because I don't know if exactly who's going to beat Joel Embiid with that stat line. But still, Markkinen played really well. This Jazz team is legit. I have to keep tooting that horn, but this Jazz team is legit, and I believe that another lottery pick is coming on the way. Because Minnesota sucks. I mean, Minnesota's starting five has the worst offensive rating in the NBA. That's even lower than the worst team offensive rating in the NBA, which is horrible. Like the Lakers, I don't know exactly know what the numbers are, but I know that Minnesota has problems, and I think going into it, um, Danny Ainge knew that going from the start, and with Wembanyama in this draft, he's like, I can afford to try to compete this season and still have a chance to get Victor Wembanyama. Um, so I want to toot my horn against the Jazz, but even in this night, Joel Embiid was not the first person to score 50 points in the season. Actually, a couple hours earlier, Darius Garland scored 51 points, had 6 assists, 2 steals in another game right before, a couple hours before. Um, so you're starting to see some historic performances from players, and I think players are starting to, finally get into that groove where they're gonna start putting up insane stat lines. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. I know Jared's a Oklahoma City Thunder fan. He's looking like a legit MVP candidate. Um, he's not gonna get talked about because he's a Thunder.
Guy's a dog.
Oh, for real? Yeah, no, he's dog certified. I want him for the Suns, but it's probably not gonna happen.
No, I will not allow it.
He's great.
I will be distraught if we, for whatever reason, move him because he's been the best player on our team since we got him.
Oh yeah. No, and I think with him, Holmgren, potentially Wembanyama, um, Uz Usman Dieng, which is a guy that I'm high on, that I was high on into this draft. People are saying that he's the next Paul George. Um, he was drafted 13th overall. He definitely looked like a Thunder's pick to me when they picked him. I think he's going to turn out to be a really special player. There's a lot of players on that roster where I think that there's potential, and Sam Presti knows what he's doing. And so, whether he gets Victor Wembanyama in this draft or not, whether he gets Scoot Henderson in this draft or not, this team is still poised for success in the future.
It's interesting because a lot of people, like, trashed him for a long time on, like, his moves of, like, moving on from KD, Russ, and, like, everything, just kinda selling everything. Then you kinda look at, like, when he finally caved and moved on from Russ, like, KD, there's nothing he could do. KD just wanted out, wanted to win, like, a championship. It was never gonna happen in OKC. And, like, when he finally decided to move on from Russ, he got, like, people were like, "Yeah, well, we're obviously just trying to lose every single game." And it's like, yeah, Russ has not been really good since he left OKC. And KD, since he left Golden State,
I would not go that far.
I'm not gonna say he wasn't good, but what's he done? Nothing.
I mean, he didn't do a whole lot in the Thunder by himself either.
No. So, like, I think he made the right moves, and, like, I don't think we're gonna be a competitor anytime soon, but we're bringing in really good talent. And the homegrown way of bringing in talent, the way the NBA's kind of looked over the last couple of years, it's looking like it's going away from, like, building a super team and, like, you have to build homegrown talent. Like, that's how I feel. Like, that's what Golden State did. Kind of their homegrown talent that came off the bench a little bit was a great thing. And, like, teams like Phoenix,
Milwaukee.
Milwaukee, say Denver,
Yeah,
in that
Denver.
category. So, like, yeah. One of the things I've really liked about the change of the NBA over the last couple of years. My bad. You can keep going.
And no, I definitely want some involvement in this, especially with this next thing that I have up. But definitely, yeah, I do think though that this is a great new model for the NBA that's going to start happening. Is I think a lot of teams are not just going to start tanking. I think people are going to look at the Utah Jazz model where maybe they're not winning with their two superstars, kind of similar to what OKC did, where they traded Russ and Paul George in the same offseason and got a whole bunch of picks, a whole bunch of draft capital. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander was in that deal as well. I I mean, personally, I think, you know, both sides of that trade won. You know, Clippers went to the conference finals for the first time in their team history. Almost made it to the finals. They ran into the juggernaut of the Phoenix Suns at the time, and then this Thunder team got Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and a plethora of picks. So many picks in that deal. So I think that's a great example of a win-win trade. Like Trey Young and Luca, very another good example of a win-win trade. But I do like this new model that's going on about growing talent from within.
The Trey Young Luka trade just like every time that any time anybody brings that up, like Trey was built for the Atlanta culture, and like Luka was literally a perfect a perfect add-in to that what the Dallas culture already was. Like those two just fit the cultures of where they ended up going, like the teams they ended up playing on just perfectly. Like I just love that trade in my mind is like one of the most fair trades in NBA history.
Yeah, especially with the Eastern European connection with Dirk and all of that stuff surrounding the Dallas Mavericks. That was definitely a perfect deal. But something that I want to get you guys involved into, if you can pull up that clip that I sent you guys. The NBA has a problem with technical fouls. So you see here, Jason Tatum gets some stupid foul. He cops his hand in frustration. That's a technical. He did it away from the referee. He didn't say anything to the referee. We watch it again. It's a foul. He pushes him. It's a definite foul. He's frustrated with himself.
It was a definite push, but to give him a T on him being frustrated is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, I do think though that like
I think the NBA refs there's some issues with refs in the NBA, and I think the NBA didn't want this to come back to light. But I just recently watched the documentary about, and I can't remember his name now. Yes, the NBA ref that was pretty much paid by the mafia to gamble and supposedly cheat games, but he openly has said that he's never point shaved the game or anything like that. But some of those refs that were involved to that day are still in the game, and I think sometimes some of those calls that look really questionable are almost like, who's paying you to make that call? And with that documentary coming back out just recently and like the story that it is and like how some people on that documentary weren't comfortable talking about certain things with, you know, things that are still currently going on, and the NBA refusing to comment on it and saying it doesn't need to be brought back up, kind of says a lot. And I think there's still some of that going on in the NBA today. And it could have, I'm not saying it was with that call, but an OKC game, I'd assume the point spread on that kind of nice, kind of a nice little bet, especially if you have a ref that can point shave for you. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, well, especially since sports betting is legal now, where it wasn't back then. I think it may be a lot easier, and that's something that you can point to. You know, definitely some money laundering. There might be a documentary coming out, 20 years down the road about stuff that's happening today. But as of right now, there have been 149 technicals called against players, just players, no coaches, nobody else, just players. 149 technicals, and we're not even a month into the season. I think, like, especially with that play, a lot of these technicals are unwarranted, and I don't really think that, you're really doing anything with the technicals. So, it's something I wish the game could change a little bit. But
Yeah, just for like as someone's perspective who hasn't necessarily watched a lot of basketball for a long time or really ever. I've watched the Last Dance, I think it's yeah, I watched The Last Dance with my dad because he was a big MJ fan back in the day, and I mean, I've grown to like him since
Who
then as
wasn't?
well.
Like,
Huh,
who wasn't a big MJ fan back
that,
in the day?
that's
We
fact.
we didn't get the opportunity. We were cheated of that, robbed of that. That's
Yeah,
okay. We can go back and watch the documentary completely forced and focused on Jordan,
exactly.
produced by Jordan. A lot of other interesting things that come with that documentary, but go on. Just wanted to throw that shot in there at Jordan.
Just as like an outside view looking in, especially just from like watching. And I know it's not at all comparable, but, like, just watching, like, high school games, it's kinda like technical fouls are or even, like, the college games we have here. Technicals are like, "Oh, dude, you're, like, really screwing up. You're doing something, like, bad. You are, like, losing like, getting mad, losing composure completely. You're like, something is going seriously wrong." When like, of it just, like, throwing your hands up like that, like, dude, anyone's going to do that. Like, that's such a natural reaction for, like, just about anyone, and get a technical for that? That's, like, honestly, that's crazy to me. Like, I don't know, like, just as someone, like, who's kinda outside looking in, like, that's very, very soft, in my opinion.
yeah, I think technicals are supposed to be for plays like that's not a part of basketball. Arguing a call, that's definitely a part of basketball. I know in collegiate sports, oh my goodness, the amount of people that are arguing for calls here, it's insane. Um, but a technical should be called if you are excessively arguing, you're losing your composure, bouncing the ball too high, that's an automatic technical. But playing basketball in high school, I've seen people cuss out the refs. I've seen people, like, put their hands on the refs, and you're not even supposed to do that, and they didn't get a technical. So I think the NBA, there might be something going on. I'm not too sure. But 149 technicals already called, and we're not even a month into the season, and I haven't really seen any big fights or nobody's been suspended for their actions. Probably besides some celebration fines, the ball's too big celebration, like stuff like that, where people are get fined. Obviously, you get fined for that. Um, but yeah, there's not been any big altercations between players and anything. I think probably the one that I can probably call is Devin Booker and Klay Thompson very early on into the season. Klay got ejected. Devin Booker got a technical. But yeah, I think we probably should not be calling as many technicals that we are right now.
What week of the NBA season is this so far?
I believe this is week number 4.
Okay, if this is week number 4, quick math. Right now we are at 149 technical fouls. So you do 149 divided by 4. That's 37 a week. Go 37 technical fouls a week times what? How many weeks is there in the NBA season? I just figured it out. I think it's around like 27 to 29 like total weeks. So if we do 37 times 27, that's 999 technical fouls that we are on pace for. If it's 27 weeks, if it's more than that, we're over 1,000. How many technical fouls, if you can, if you know that, were in the NBA last regular season?
I honestly,
It was like 500 something, right?
I was looking at numbers, and that was the closest number I got because I was counting it by myself. So my
Oh, nice.
so my math might be off because I couldn't find any numbers where it was culminated. But
Like,
even it,
yeah, that's something the NBA wouldn't want to let be known. I feel like
yeah, well, even in the WNBA, there's like 8 teams or 16 teams, excuse me, 8 in each conference. Um, there were only 97 technicals called. Now they have a significantly shorter season, but they've played about the same amount of games that we have in the NBA, and the NBA already has about 50 more technicals already called. And this is something that the refs need to fix up, especially in officiating. There's been a lot of late game things that need to be fixed up. So probably just a revamp of the whole ref system might be in place, but we'll just have to wait and see on that. But moving on from the probably one of the softest technicals I've ever seen.
the softest technical of all time,
Oh
and
yeah,
that's against my team.
yeah. I remember. There's a clip circulating where it's like what players used to get technicals back in the day. Kareem like nailed a guy, knocked him out cold, and that was one technical. That's it. You know, Nobody wanted to mess with Kareem, so there wasn't a big fight going on. Kareem knocked him out cold, and that was just one technical. So moving on from that, just a small little piece of news. This may be a bigger story in the coming weeks, but the Aaron Fox is signing with Clutch Sports. That's Rich Paul's agency. Um, and it's like, oh, he signed with a new agent, big deal. Now with the Clutch Sports agency, a lot of times players in struggling situations sign with that agency to get out of their situation. Um, that's LeBron's agent. So he's like, hey, I don't like it here in Cleveland. Get me out of here. Hey, I don't like it here in Cleveland for a second time. Get me out of here. Um, and so I think this may be, time for a possible trade. I know he's talked about, one of his biggest regrets is not working out for the Phoenix Suns during his rookie year. I don't see that as a likely trade. We just don't have the money or the space to do it. But some big clients that are clutch clients. LeBron James plays for the Los Angeles Lakers. Anthony Edwards, who plays for the Minnesota Timberwolves. They're struggling and they need a point guard. They have D'Angelo Russell's contract that they can just swap that out easy. Colin Sexton, actually 3 players on the Jazz. Colin Sexton, um, I know there's 3 players. Taylor Horton Tucker, and then there's another player on the Jazz are all clutch clients. Zach Levine, who plays for the Bulls, which they could probably use another point guard. Uh, they don't look like a great team, but adding Darren Fox to the mix could make them a pretty dangerous competitor. And Ben Simmons of the Brooklyn Nets. KD trade. There's a lot that's going on. So a lot of things that could possibly happen from this move. This is just me predicting. I think De'Aaron Fox is going to get moved. After playing in Sacramento for so long, it kind of sucks. Sacramento has not really done anything ever, and they haven't actually within all active players that are playing right now. No player has ever played the Sacramento Kings in the playoffs. That's insane. Out of everyone on the list, even LeBron, nobody has even Chris Paul, who's played in the West, nobody has played the Sacramento Kings in the playoffs.
That's disgusting. That they're that terrible of an organization. They
Yeah.
need to. If the NBA wants to move a team, move Sacramento. Like honestly,
Yeah.
no one's gonna care. I don't feel like they have a. There's no way they have a loyal fan base. They're terrible. That's terrible.
Now, speaking of moving a team, it was just announced today that a new potential city is up for getting a new NBA team. And now a lot of people are saying, "Oh, Seattle's gonna get another team again," or "Vegas is gonna get another team." But, actually a city in which the NBA has played a couple games in, a city where basketball is pretty big, in a country where basketball is pretty big. Mexico City is being viewed as a legit contender to receive an NBA expansion team. Now, they have an arena. Um, the NBA has a series where they go and play games in Mexico City. We already have a team in Toronto. So crossing borders is not a problem, for the NBA. I would not mind.
During COVID, that became a little bit of an issue. But is it over up there?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure about Trudeau and the entire all the Canadian politics up there. Wasn't sure if that was all over or not yet because they're a different group up there. I'm not gonna delve into politics because right now the political world literally on
Bro,
fire.
you can delve into politics about Canada because no one likes Trudeau. Canadians don't like Trudeau.
You know where that leads me.
Yes,
That
but,
leads
like,
right
no,
back
I think it's a pretty good consensus that pretty much anyone does not like Trudeau because the guy's an idiot.
I do have a lot of Canadian friends. Like, I at a Christian camp I worked at during the summer, most of them were Canadian, which was weird. Why you're working at a camp in Northern Arizona. Um, but they hate Trudeau.
You like the warmer weather, eh?
Yeah, it wasn't even warm. It's Northern Arizona. Like, it was cold. Felt like 32 degrees at night.
That's warm for them.
That's true, yeah. You know, but going back to the original topic, Mexico City would be a great place to put an NBA team. Especially, more not cultural appropriation, that's bad, but cultural diversity, you know, a great city to get an NBA team. Mexico City is a great candidate, and I would not mind seeing the Mexico City Rays, Reys, for those who don't speak Spanish. Oh yeah, yeah, and well, I mean, the World Cup's coming up this Sunday. The World Cup starts. I have a Mexico City jersey. It was a little too cold to rock that today, but
I'm not
let's not go there. That's a discussion for another day. I definitely want to see America beat England, but I don't know exactly. All right, buddy. All right, buddy. I honestly want to see Portugal and Argentina in that final, which actually people have predicted. This is Messi. Okay, he ain't Ronaldo, he ain't Messi, but you know, I for me personally, I would definitely love to see a team in Mexico City, but within the terms of expansion, we just have to wait and see what the NBA has to do. But other than that, that's all I have for the NBA. I know I looked at the sheet today, and there's quite a lot of stuff happening in F1. So Tyler, take it away.
All right. Welcome back to F1 this week, guys. This week, we were in Monaco, Brazil. For those who don't know where Monaco is, because, I mean, honestly, F1 is probably the coolest sport in that it goes to some of the most exotic places in the entire world and just races there casually. Um, just a side note. But we were in Monaco this week, and it was a sprint race this week, which I know a lot of you out there don't keep up with F1 and just don't even know what I'm talking about half the time. But I'm gonna try to my best to explain what a sprint weekend is for F1. Basically, qualifying is normal, but it is earlier on in the weekend. So basically, qualifying was Friday. Um, and it's qualifying is split into three sections. Basically, there are three sections lasting 18 minutes each, and in each one, the five slowest drivers are dropped, and their positions are set. So in the first quarter, or quali, as they like to call it, 20th 19, 18, 17, 16, their places are set in the grid. And then the next one, it would be up to 11 and so on. But in this last quali, Q3, pole means that basically you take the first place in the sprint, which is massive for teams because the sprint not only means that you're going where you end up in the sprint is also where you're going to end up for the actual race, but you also gain points from the sprint based on your position, which is a lot like our actual race, but much less points. But it could be a massive upset for teams that are looking to grasp those points in the final literally the final of the constructors championship and the drivers championship because there are many seats in contention right now. Mercedes just got into contention for Ferrari. Um, Perez is matched with Leclerc for P2 in the drivers championship. It is still a very contentious like grid out there right now, and in both constructors and drivers championships, there are many teams to look at. Like I said, in a Mercedes, in a Red Bull, in a Ferrari, all three teams are in contention for at least something. And even in the midfield, you've got Alpine, Alfa Romeo, McLaren, all grasping for basically what's left after the big three. But getting back to the quali. Now there was a massive upset at the end of this quali just because rain was bad. There was a lot of just not good conditions for racing. Lots of slipping, lots of sliding. There was a unfortunate wreck by Checo Perez um late in that last quali. Um and that led to Kevin Magnussen of Haas gaining first in quali, which I think is first his first pole in quali ever, which is a massive step up for Haas. It didn't last long, uh, unfortunately, as he did gain 8th in the sprint, with Russell taking first, Sainz in second, Hamilton in third, and both Red Bulls taking fourth and fifth. Now, just starting off, it was not a good weekend for Red Bull. I am very sad to say, and there's been a lot of drama going on with Red Bull, which I will get to in a moment, but the two silver arrows this weekend were looking immaculate. They were driving beautifully, with Russell taking a pole, his first pole of the season, I believe, actually. Um, which is a bit of a foreshadow. Um, but as far as the sprint goes, it was very good. Um, I mean, Ham- Magnussen ending up in 8th is a net loss for him. It really is. Haas needs the points to move up in the constructors. They really need that money to work on their car. They need a lot to start competing. And I think everyone that's watched um F1 for the past few years understands that. But that's just a little bit of conjecture there. Now, getting to the actual race. There's a lot of different things to look at. First, the results. George Russell takes first. It is his first career win this week in Monaco, which is an extremely momentous occasion for the young Englishman. Now, there's been a lot of memes floating around on the F1 channel just about like his reaction to when he first got points and his reaction to his first race. They are basically the same. He bawled his eyes out like a baby, but it's so beautiful to see him on his journey and how he's come up this far. I'm honestly very proud of Russell just coming from Williams, having to prove himself, gaining that top tier seat in Mercedes, and actually being able to show off his capabilities in today's race or this past weekend's race. Um, now the this is also the first time since 2020 that both Silver Arrows have taken first and second place, which is a very good um like point in this season for them, just because it means that they still have it. It means that they are still a very contentious team going forward, and I think next season we're going to see that more. Um, but as of right now, George Russell and Hamilton are looking very good. Um, again, it was also the first place or race win of the season for Mercedes, which was drawing close. I didn't know if they were actually gonna make it, but they just looked so good this past weekend. Um, and then with George Russell taking first, Hamilton taking second, Sainz in third, and uncharacteristically, the two Red Bulls are in sixth and seventh, respectively. With neither of them having a particularly good run this week, a lot of tension between the two, as Verstappen ignores a direct team order late in the race to switch spots with Perez, so Perez could get maximum points for the race. Verstappen didn't give his reasons and said it had been discussed earlier. Now, like I said earlier, a few minutes earlier, there had been a bit of a scuff up by Checo Perez in qualifying. Now, many speculate that that was on purpose, and it kind of screwed up Verstappen because Verstappen was on his fly lap, which basically is the fast lap to set your time to qualify. It screwed that entirely. And it is rumored that Verstappen blames Perez for his loss here. So, thus not giving him the position to gain more points on Leclerc in the Drivers' Championship. And just as a little point here, Perez has helped Max Verstappen gain so many wins this season and last season. He has single-handedly won Verstappen races. He has been his partner in crime for 2 constructors championships or driver championships. How you can turn your back on someone that's helped you so much and just say, "No, screw you. I don't care about your driver's championship. I don't care if you get second overall," which would be the first time in a long time for Red Bull to be first and second in the drivers championship. I forget when it was. I think it may have been 20. I don't want to say because I don't actually remember. And I don't want to get flamed by people that actually know. But it's been a while since Red Bull has had 2 people in the drivers' championship that won it too. And for Perez, this would be a massive moment. In the pits on the garage, you could see Perez's dad honestly crying and just very disappointed with Verstappen's decision there. Was it petty? Extremely. Were there maybe other reasons as to why things are going on the way they are? We don't really know at this moment, and I don't think it's actually going to be discussed with us just because I think it's a very internal issue, um, and all that. But Christian Horner has come out and said, oh, head of Red Bull at the moment, their team, he has said that they have shaken hands and are looking forward to Abu Dhabi. Whether that's actually true or not, I think we'll see. But it was very, very tense after that race. Looking at any interaction with Perez and Verstappen, you could cut that tension with a knife. It was thick. Whether they've actually resolved it or not, we don't know. But more drama with Verstappen actually. One more thing, and I think that's basically all that's really happened for this race. And then just looking forward to Abu Dhabi, which is going to be a great race. I think it's going to be a very eventful race. Just seeing who's actually going to come on top because Verstappen and Perez had a bad weekend. Whether that's going to continue on to Abu Dhabi, we don't know. Ferrari didn't exactly do terribly terribly well either. But Mercedes is looking like they're kind of coming back. And if that's true, I think we see more silver arrows on that podium. Who knows? But lastly, more drama with Verstappen. Verstappen had a collision with Lewis Hamilton. Um, again, late on in the race, or around midpoint in the race, I think. Where Verstappen is clearly in the wrong. He basically just sends it into a corner where he has no room, and Hamilton is basically Hamilton's on the race line. There is an argument that Verstappen is close enough along the side of him to be in the alongside classification, which would give him preferential treatment so that Hamilton would have to give him space on that corner. But it more looked like Hamilton was already in the corner and Verstappen kind of just butted himself in there, which left Hamilton squeezing into the butt of a angry Verstappen. And that doesn't end well. At least this time, Hamilton gets out like basically without any serious problems, while Verstappen is sent back to the pits to basically recover from his wounded pride, as he clearly is kind of just screwing up not driving in first place. It's sad to see, honestly, as a Red Bull fan, just Verstappen really not respecting the spot he's kind of in at the moment. I don't know if this is kind of a harsh take for something that may or may not be that serious, but Verstappen was clearly in the wrong. He forced himself into a position he shouldn't have been in. And in the press conference afterwards, he basically says, I mean, it wasn't gonna affect my race. I knew he wasn't gonna let me space. Yeah, I was already kind of screwed. It wasn't gonna affect like he he was so nonchalant and unserious, and he wasn't at all admitting that like he was in the wrong there. He's basically just saying, "Oh, I screwed him over so that like Perez could have maybe a chance." But he didn't say that. Yeah, I some things are going on in the Red Bull corner and it does not bode well for us. Luckily, it is at the very end of the season and literally one more race to go at Abu Dhabi and we're done, and any more drama that has to go on can happen over winter break. I do not care. Just wait till March, figure things out, and then come back in March. Okay? We can get these things figured out and not cause problems for the next season. But that's just my hope. And that's honestly all I have for F1 this week. But I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Okay. Oh, okay. So basically, this is going to be a fun little segment where we're gonna have another little debate on this week. Who is the best, the greatest NFL player that was not a QB in the history of the NFL? And we all have different people this week. I'll let every person announce theirs in turn. I think we're probably gonna want to start with Jared when he gets everything going on and working. He has some technical issues with his mic. We're getting that switched out and figured out. But actually, maybe we'll start with you, Nate. Who is your greatest player in NFL history?
I think the reason why we have to say non-QB is because it's an open and shut case that Tom Brady's the greatest,
Unfortunately, it's Tom Brady. Yeah.
greatest player of all time. But for me personally, it's a player that played both sides of the ball. know. And it's Deion Sanders is my pick. I think he was probably one of the greatest. I'll explain later why everyone else has announced their picks.
So, can we hear? Can you hear me now? What the frick happened to my mic? Not really sure, but literally wanted to switch out the mics because of the debate thing because we were going to go 3-camera wide, and we're not 3-camera wide. Forgot about that until I said it out loud. But I picked the obvious pick. I picked the guy, the wide receiver that a lot of people admire, that a lot of people look back and he's like, this guy's the GOAT for a reason. Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice, when you look at his numbers, when you look at his production on the field, when you look at his entire career, how do you say anybody's better than the self-proclaimed king of tailgating, Jerry Rice? Tyler, who's your greatest player in football that is a non-quarterback? You have probably the most interesting one. So I'm interested to see how you argue it because I couldn't argue for him, but I think he is an extremely good player. But you say who yours is.
For my player, I have Jim Brown. For a couple of reasons. But yeah, my pick is Jim Brown.
Okay. I'm going to give some reasons why I think Jerry Rice is the greatest player that is not a quarterback to touch the field. Jerry Rice played for a long time in the NFL. He played for exactly 20-something. I said I was going to do the exact, and then I literally could not come up with the exact amount of seasons that he played. I think it was 20 seasons.
It's 20. It's 20.
It is 20 seasons. 20 seasons at the wide receiver position. That's not done. Not only did he play 20 seasons at the wide receiver position, he played for multiple teams. And other wide receivers have done that, right? Not abnormal to do. What's abnormal to do is to play for multiple teams and have multiple seasons for multiple teams with 1,000 yards.
Multiple teams.
He played for San Francisco and Oakland. And when he played at Oakland, he had 2 seasons in Oakland where he went over 1,000 yards receiving at the tail end of his career, 2001 and 2002. Really the tail end of his career. After that he played in 2003, and he played 2004 for Oakland and Seattle. But in 2001 and 2002, tail end of his career, he's an old man at this point, playing across from Tim Brown, a fantastic wide receiver. Goes for 1,000, 2 seasons in a row, back to back, as an old man. Julio Jones right now couldn't do that. He's playing across from Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. He couldn't go for 1,000. Jerry Rice is the epitome of what a great player is. 14 seasons in his NFL career, he eclipsed 1,000 yards receiving. The next closest on that list, Randy Moss. You guys have any idea how many 1,000 yards receiving he had?
What was the first number?
Jerry Rice had 14.
I think it's 11.
Randy Moss had 10. The next person on that list, there's 4 people. They're all tied at 9. Larry Fitzgerald, T.O., Jimmy Smith, and Tim Brown. After that, it's 8. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 guys that have 8 straight 1,000-yard seasons. And then after that, you see guys that we have seen in our lifetime play really well. Julio Jones, Antonio Brown, and Calvin Johnson. Megatron, a Hall of Famer, had half of the amount of 1,000 yards receiving that he had. The weirdest name on this list that I just said is Mike Evans, who has had 8 seasons where he's had 1,000 yards. It's bizarre because he hasn't been in the league all that long. But when you look at what Jerry Rice did compared to any of these other Hall of Famers that are on this list, because this entire list,
I mean, you look down at Randy Moss, Larry Fitzgerald, T.O., Jimmy Smith, Tim Brown, Mike Evans, Brandon Marshall, Reggie Wayne, Steve Smith Sr., Derek Mason, Torrey Holt, Marvin Harrison, Rod Smith, Isaac Bruce, Chris Carter, Steve Largent, Julio Jones, Antonio Brown, Calvin Johnson. All those guys are Hall of Famers or should be Hall of Famers one day in their NFL career. Jerry Rice destroys them in his stats. Jerry Rice, 4 Super Bowls. Jerry Rice, a Super Bowl MVP.
3.
4.
3.
4.
How many?
Pretty sure it's 4. He won 4 with San Fran. Oh, no, he only won 3.
Yeah,
You're
it
right.
was just
My bad. I always get that confused. That's on me. That's on me.
trying to pad the numbers.
Well, maybe a little bit. Maybe a little bit. I was trying to pad the numbers. One of the best receivers of the 80s. One of the best receivers of the 90s. How many wide receivers could say they were the best receiver in 2 straight decades? Not many. I don't think any could say that. To be honest with you.
Yeah,
I don't think anybody could say that.
He did win all decade.
2 decades in a row.
Yeah, 2 decades in a row.
Nobody does that. Nobody does that. Jerry Rice, dog before the term dog was a real thing. Like, just a pro's pro. Just, even up until his old age, he's still trying to make rosters. The last year he was cut in, like, 2005, they literally said, Jerry, like, just retire. You're too old. He tried to play on Denver in 2005. After 2004, his year in Seattle, tried to play in Denver. It was like, Jerry, just retire, please. You're 43 years old. Enjoy your life. You don't have to play football the rest of your life. Maybe other people should take that advice. Jerry Rice, though, I read a book about him. I don't read books. Read a book about him as a child. Still remember it to this day. It was a culmination book of Jerry Rice and Joe Montana. Probably the only book I've read in my life. My favorite book I've ever read in my life, to be fair, because it's probably the only book I've read. And that's because I read it because I was just obsessed with Jerry Rice. I wanted to be Jerry Rice as a kid because, like, the amount of the work ethic he had. The work ethic you have to be an all-pro as many times as he was an all-pro, a 3-time Super Bowl champion. He's a 10-time all-pro, 13-time Pro Bowler. Twice he was an all-decade wide receiver. He was his Rookie of the Year, whatever, Super Bowl MVP. I mean, should have won an MVP award at some point. Never did, but that's because, wide receivers don't do that ever. But Jerry Rice, an animal, and the epitome of greatness. It's tough to really, and even when he played Deion Sanders couldn't lock him down. And that's a real shame. That's a real shame. Nate, let me hear your argument on Deion.
To be fair, nobody locked Jerry Rice down.
It's because Jerry was the GOAT.
But if there was anyone close, his name was Deion Sanders.
Prime time.
Deion Sanders, I would say the undisputed greatest cornerback of all time. I don't really know of another name that comes up. And the thing is that if we're talking about the debate is called who is the greatest player, not a QB, in all of NFL history. I don't remember Jerry Rice ever playing cornerback. I remember doing that. I do remember, though, Deion Sanders lining up as a wide receiver and still scoring points for the offense. Let's look at some stats, because Jerry Rice is all the stats, and so. But if we're looking at stats, in terms of just scoring, Deion Sanders scored 132 points in his career. That's just off touchdowns. That's no extra points. That's 6 points per 132 points. That's including pick sixes. That's including punt returns, kickoff returns, touchdowns he's had as a wide receiver. Oh, sorry, that's passing. My bad. Go again.
Quick math, 22 touchdowns. Can't hear me, though, can you?
I can.
Okay, I can't hear myself, but that's probably why I don't think you guys can hear me. 22 touchdowns he had in his career. Really good.
The thing is though, those are touchdowns for a cornerback that occasionally played wide receiver. So in terms of, prime time, in terms of a person that, you know, people were scared to play against.
Could have had wide receivers to, maybe play offense. Interesting thought. They wouldn't have had to use him. I'm just joking because he did play on Dallas at one point with Michael Irvin.
One of the greatest teams
Yeah.
ever, all time. But concerning his defensive stats, he has 53 interceptions on his career. That's a lot. And I was watching highlights this morning. Huh? Yeah, 54. What did I say? 53? My bad. 54.
You're shorting him.
I was shorting him a little bit. My bad. This is an inaccurate stat, I guess. Probably not using pro football reference. My bad. That's on me. But Deion Sanders, 53 interceptions, but he probably could have scored a lot more touchdowns. But with after he passed the 25-yard line, he was already high stepping. So I mean, if Deion Sanders wasn't as much of a showboat, he probably could have killed it a lot more. In terms of swag, in terms of being a dog, like a complete player off the field as well. He was even a baseball player, and that don't get talked about enough. I mean, this is not the debate of greatest athlete of all time. Maybe that could be a debate for another time. Bo Jackson, um, Deion Sanders.
Tyler and I had that debate last week, actually, in the room.
Wait, who did you all say? I'm curious.
It's a non-comparable issue for me. Because in my opinion, and this is going to go down an entirely different tangent, and he was freaking pushing me when we were talking about it last week. You're on camera, by the way, stupid.
Oh my god. There was this. I forgot. There was an ad on
Unmute yourself.
There was an ad.
No, on the freaking stream, stupid.
There was an ad on my computer on the website. Did that play through the stream?
No.
Okay, we're good. Okay. It was a Hyundai Elantra ad, and I just didn't want to get kicked off of YouTube for Hyundai Elantra kind of trying to come at us. But go on, my bad. I completely cut you off.
Basically, my issue with it is if you're trying to judge multiple different people's accomplishments off of one metric in even say they did multiple different sports, I don't necessarily think it's a comparable issue just because many different things are required for many different sports. And a lot of a lot of like knowledge and IQ in those different like areas of expertise are required. And like I don't I just don't think it's a comparable issue. If you're going to say one best of a certain category, yes, I believe that's a fair debate and topic. If we wanted to completely just like go ham and be like, "Oh yes, this person is the most athletic person of all time." Like I mean we could have that debate. It's just it's very hard to have that conversation in my opinion.
Michael Phelps.
That is
Your button
Dog.
Your button doesn't mute you.
It doesn't?
No, I've been muting on stream.
Oh, okay. Well, stop hitting it then.
man. Technical difficulty has been the story of the end of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in terms of Deion and his greatness, people were scared to play against him. Arguably the best cornerback to ever play. Deion Sanders. If he ever, sorry, not who the heck did you just say? No, the Jerry Rice. If Jerry Rice ever said, there was a matchup that challenged me, it was Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders could get into somebody's head. Deion Sanders, he has 2 championships, played for one of the greatest teams of all time. If he was all in football to begin with, to begin his career, he might have won a lot more with the Atlanta Falcons. Um, but to be honest, I think my argument for Deion Sanders is he played both sides of the ball. He was an elite cornerback, an okay wide receiver, and just an incredible athlete in kickoff returns and punt returns. Every time he touched the ball, it was showtime. He was always doing something for his team. And so that's why Deion Sanders is, in my opinion, the greatest non-quarterback player to ever play in the NFL, just because of his impact on the team whenever he touched the ball, whenever he was on the field. It's his impact was always seen. And even when he was coming off, the helicopter, if you've seen that documentary, 30 for 30 of him the same day playing a baseball game and then going playing a football game. Dion was that guy, and no matter how tired he was, no matter sleeping on the plane, he still went out and performed that same day. Still was Deion Sanders. So that's my argument for Dion being the GOAT. Yeah, I think you have the last up. So end the show, man.
All right. Um, my pick is Jim Brown. And in my opinion, I'm just gonna say, like, for what he accomplished in his 9 seasons in the game is almost unmatched. If not unmatched in his specialty of running the ball. I don't know about that. But like
Barry was a dog.
true. Yes. I agree.
My technical difficulty was my mic was set as the camera and not my own mic, but just so you guys are aware, I screwed up big time, but
That makes a lot more
Yeah.
sense.
go on about Jim Brown.
To be fair, though, Barry Sanders did play for the Lions, so that is definitely a big
And Jim
thing.
and Jim Brown played for Cleveland. Comparable.
Like, you look at his 3-time most valuable player, 8-time first team All-Pro, 9-time Pro Bowl. He was every single season he played, he was in Pro Bowl. 8-time NFL rushing yards leader. Literally every single year except for one, he didn't get rushing yards leader of the entire NFL. 5-time NFL rushing touchdown leader. NFL scoring leader in 1958. Like 1960s all-decade team. Like and he won the Burt Bell Award in 1963. And like I don't know, man. Presented to Maxwell's Football Club to the Player of the Year in the National Football League. So he was Player of the Year in 1963. Or 1963. He was Player of the Year. Which, yeah, it's a dog move, especially for his position. Like, I don't really feel like you see that happen much. Like, if ever, like if running back is like rare or wide receivers rare, how much more is a linebacker or not a linebacker?
Running back. Well, back in the day, actually, running backs heavily valued.
Okay.
Ran the ball quite a bit as well.
Yeah.
They scored 222 points in one game just off of rushing touchdowns alone. Like
Yeah, that was back before they even invented the
He has
pass.
106 rushing touchdowns.
Guy was a dog.
He's got 12,000 rushing yards, 2,000 receiving, 2,500 receiving yards. Literally 1 yard off on that receiving yard. It's 2,499. 2,000, basically.
I mean, you round up. I'm glad you used him because I don't feel like he gets all the respect that he actually honestly deserves in a lot of these arguments.
I'm gonna be honest. When I looked up like who I was gonna talk about, I literally just looked up top 100 NFL players. Like it, and basically I just started looking through them, and for what, in my opinion, for what he did, in the time he did it, and how his record has kind of stood, or like how his impact has kind of stood for this long, he's a dog.
And that's my reason for like him being the GOAT. Just like I think he had a much greater impact and a lasting impact than most players can really ever claim. Except for who was it? What's his name? Uh yes, Barry Sanders.
Dog.
So that's my reason for him being the GOAT.
I'll be honest, it's extremely tough to argue against anybody's reasoning because like Jerry has all the stats. Dion was literally a difference maker, and like Jim Brown, 9 seasons in his 9 seasons though, statistically and actually one of the most impactful players in his time. So due to this, can't pick a winner here. I won last week's, obviously. We all know this. LeBron is the GOAT. This week has to be a fan vote down in the comments. Comment who you think won this debate. We'll be interested to see. But that's pretty much all we got. So, great show, boys. Great show. We will be back next week, much earlier in the week than normal because I am flying back home on Tuesday, back to Pennsylvania. So, there'll probably be a very early episode, probably either out next Monday or next Tuesday. Not sure what day we're going to be able to record. Probably the episode will be out on Tuesday because I doubt we'll actually be prepared to do an episode Sunday night into Monday. So, with that being said, we will see you next week. Next week, we will do a Thanksgiving food draft. If you have missed the drafts, we will bring it back this week. And then for Christmas, we are going heavy draft, and there is a few coming after that. I will save that to tease it a little next week, but really looking forward to next week's episode. We hope you enjoy it. Hope you guys have enjoyed the sports trivia thing that we're doing on the shorts of the YouTube. That will be continued daily, along with 90-second news will continue as well. Excited to see what we're building here. We're gaining some traction, gaining some steam, and it's all thanks to you guys that watch and listen, and we appreciate every single one of you. It means a whole lot to us, and you guys are the best. We will see you next week, though.